Good evening, friends. Welcome to the new session, live session of Exports Nation Daily Live on BJ Exports Mastery channel. Let's wait for a few minutes for more people to join. Janaji, good evening. Welcome to the session. So, friends, this is the concluding part of our limited series on the training for the foreign trade policy. Understanding of the foreign trade policy, in my opinion, is quite important for the exporting community so that they are aware of the strategy and the approach of the local government. So, where the local government is moving towards making the inward and outward flow of goods and of the foreign exchange, what are the policies and what is the direction? So, you can understand from the changes which are coming in the foreign trade policies and the provisions of the foreign trade policies that which are the areas where the support is available, government support is available. So this is only one example I'm giving. There are many other benefits of the foreign trade policy understanding. So friends, in the concluding session of today, when we are talking of the foreign trade policy from the point of view that we are under the umbrella of such policies which are made as per the rules and regulation of the World Trade Organization. And because of that, there are a lot of convergence of the provisions which are there in the foreign trade policy. So, in today's session, friends, this is the concluding session. I will just take the example again of India's foreign trade policy and will explain to you the highs and lows, the high points and the low points of the current foreign trade policy. And of course, because of these highs and these lows, this analysis, you will find that the new policy which is taking time to come, because this time government do not want to get into a situation where the exporting community is facing our exporting community is facing the kind of problems which we can easily analyze in the current policy. So that is my idea. So by this example which I'll be taking today, you will get an idea that what kind of challenges are there in formulation of the policies. Pradeep ji, good evening, welcome to the session. I'm really sorry today that I had not created the session in the morning, which I generally do, and I was a little preoccupied with certain work, so I could not create the session. So some of the audience they could not really see the live session link today. So I will make sure that it is done early in the morning or one day before the live session will be created. So today this happened. So because of which I think probably some people thought that today the session may not be there. So I'm really sorry for that again. So coming back to the concluding part, which I am talking about of the foreign trade policy today, I will just share with you few analysis point. What are the highs and what are the lows of the current foreign trade policy of India? This will give you an idea, better understanding of the provisions of the foreign trade policy, and when the new policy comes, it will make sense to you. So by this analysis of today, which is the concluding part of this session, you will be able to understand the new provisions which will be coming in the 2021-26 policy. Again, all this jugglery which we are doing to understand the foreign trade policy of India, i- the purpose is to understand very broadly the factors, internal factors and the external factors which play in any such policy. Even if you take the example of the foreign trade policy of US, United States, there have been lot of problems, a lot of failures and highs and lows. So it is not that the foreign trade policy of a country like India, which is actually doing very good, much better than any other economy, large economy, the growth rate is very good. So foreign trade also is growing, and in uh, recent quarters, the export has really grown of India. So so this is very common thing. It is not very exclusive to the Indian foreign trade policy. We are just taking it as an example for the understanding purpose, for the academic purpose. So I will just share with you in this concluding part few slides where we'll be analyzing the highs and lows of the current foreign trade policy of India. So you will have a better idea. So coming back to the what are the highlights of the current foreign trade policy of India. So friends, you already have now understood about the MEIS scheme, which had to be scrapped because of the complaint by United States against India in WTO, that this scheme, merchandise exports from India scheme, is akin to subsidy, giving subsidy to the exporters. So as a thought, it was a great scheme, but it was definitely red flagged by WTO. WTO also agreed. The panel which was formed to look into this scheme also agreed that it looks like subsidy. Now, SCIS is still there and is also having a positive impact. In fact, MEIS was also having a positive impact, but it was red flagged by WTO. Somehow SCIS has still not been red flagged by WTO. It is still under consideration by WTO, and India has not scrapped it. But MES we have scrapped in spite of a good scheme. It was a good scheme actually, but the probably the scheme should have been made in some other way. Maybe in the some earlier schemes it should have been clubbed so that it would not have looked like the subsidy scheme. So this policy, current policy, friends, enabled the manufacturers to self-certify their Indian manufactured goods for export purpose. So that was very good thing. Also, to get the certificate of origin, declarations could be given. The methods were made simpler in the policy, and many other certifications where self certification can work at least for the local purpose. If there is any requirement of the local government, that is Indian government, from the manufacturers, they could do the self certification. uh, that will work, so they do not have to go to different agencies to get it certified. So that was a very good thing. Now, another very high point of the current policy was that the export promotion capital goods scheme, EPCG scheme, obligation was reduced to 75%, which means the whatever the value of the goods, the duty saved, instead of 90% of that value to be exported, it was made 75%. So EPCG obligation reduced. So this was also very high point of this scheme. Now, this particular current scheme, friends, acknowledged up to 108 different MSME enterprises. So there was a lot of focus on MSME in this policy. So almost more than 100 different sectors of MSME had been acknowledged, and they have been provided the recognition by this policy, and they are getting extra benefits. So there are different extra benefits are available in the government support scheme, which different policies, export incentive schemes, which are there for MSME. There are many extra points, extra benefits. So those were given. So this was very good thing. Now another very important point, positive point of the current policy, the highs of the current policy, is that it promoted the filing of the various different DGFT licenses, different types of licenses. If certain goods which are being exported require any license or any permissions and any applications to be made for any steps in exports, it was made paperless online. So this was very good thing. It really made the life simpler for the exporters. So these were some very good points. Now the high points were not beyond what I have just discussed in the two slides. Then there were several friends low points also. Now, understanding low points is very important because these low points, friends, will help in understanding that these issues are addressed in the new policy, 2021-26 policy. Uh, so, to start with, the current policy, which is still in force, 2015-20, it failed to address the multi-dimensional issues in terms of insecurity amongst the exporters. So, friends, what happens? The payment comes late. You already know that the goods has to be sold. It has to be, many good inputs have to be imported. Manufacturing has to be done, and government of India promises many incentives like duty drawback and many other support systems are there, which that take time to come to the exporters. So what happens? Different sectors like gems and jewelry or handloom or handicrafts or textiles or pharmaceuticals. So if they are doing any commitments, international commitments, there are certain insecurities amongst the exporters due to the unstable nature of the current policy because of what happened with MEI scheme, especially what happened with MEI scheme. The normal exporter will not understand this idea of World Trade Organization, what happened with World Trade Organization, what about the complaint by US, why US will complain against India. So the grassroots exporter will not understand that. They will only understand that there was a scheme, and under the scheme, they exported something, and now that incentive is not available. So, what happens? It increases the insecurity amongst the exporters. So, that actually happened, and that is one of the reason why the exporter should understand the ideas about foreign trade policy and the role of WTO, all those things which I am discussing, because they have to make their strategies accordingly. So these kind of securities will be less in that case. And another insecurity came from the dropping of the global demand because of the recent upheavals. First it was COVID-19, then it was Russia-Ukraine war, and because of these things, the global economy is also moving towards recession. Uh, Maybe temporary, maybe short time, but it has definitely decreased the global demand of certain products. So that also increased the insecurity. So whether what is the role of the current foreign trade policy in this, it is a question of debate. So the only thing the exporter will say that in such cases when the insecurities are there are possibilities of dropping of the global demand to such a great extent. So they thought that some provision should have been given in the policy to address the insecurities amongst the exporters. Now, the other low point was again focusing on certain schemes which were protectionist in nature. So, some of the provisions of the foreign trade policy, current policies, internationally they are being debated, and they are being no, they are being judged as the protectionist measures. So, in today's world, countries should not resort to any protectionist measures. So, what is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that a healthy competition is required. Now that India's GDP is reaching the level which are making India a better economic powerhouse. So in such cases, it will not be good that in these policies protectionist measures are included. So some of the provisions were thought to be protectionist. So it is again debatable, but they were there. Then removal of many of the old schemes. So, to give way to MEIS and SEIS, now old schemes, many export old schemes were removed, and the unexpected result was that those schemes which were already there and which were not red flagged by WTO, at least the exporter will think that they were not red flagged. Maybe some of the older export scheme might also have been red flagged like MEIS, but general thinking is that when the old schemes were working and they were giving the results, so this MEIS scheme should not have come, which that has actually been red flagged by WTO. So there is little bit of criticism of discontinuing with the older export schemes. So in this foreign trade policy, that is what has happened. And other internal crucial internal concerns. So, for example, some of the sectors were getting some extra benefits, like textiles. Textile, there were certain schemes. Gems and jewelry, there were certain schemes. So, sectoral schemes were there, and they had some internal concerns of themselves, including the internal concern of the logistics cost. So, I had discussed with you that we are spending hell of a money on the logistics costs and the cost involved in clearance of the goods, time and cost involved in those things. So these are many concerns which for many years has not been addressed. So, but definitely it will be addressed because now India is signatory to TFA, Trade Facilitation Agreement. So obviously many of these concerns will be addressed. But this was also not done on time. So that is the general thinking of the exporters. And we have already talked about, friends, the red flagging of the MES scheme. So complaint was for both MES and SES, but up till now, the MES only has been red flagged. So SES is still working. So this is the status. So India, now another thing, friends, which is being debated by the experts, that India was not ready for a rather more complex system. So, what happened, friends? This new policy had certain provisions, including MEIS or SES schemes, which were actually complex in nature. So, this is now being thought that India was not really ready because, friends, you know what happens when you are working for many years on certain schemes. You have understood the schemes, you know that payment will be made by government of India in time, so exporters can take decisions. But in now, what has happened in this scheme, no exporter will reduce the export price thinking that government will pay for any of this scheme, because what has happened with MES and other things. So insecurities have come, and complexities are such that it is not very clear whether to reduce the export price or not. And if you don't reduce the export price, you become uncompetitive in the international market. So this is what is one of the thinking which has gone. Just for the academic purpose, I'm trying to explain to you, to in order for you to understand the difficulties and the challenges of formulating the foreign trade policies. And another thing, the foreign free trade agreements which India had been doing with bilateral agreements like Thailand or Singapore or UAE. So what has happened that instead of the exports increasing with these agreements, imports actually have increased, not the exports. So, so what happened, friend? That because of the rise of imports due to the free entry of the goods under FTAs. So what happened that many of the goods from India, like many of the industries in India, they could not sell their goods domestically and also could not export because of the lack of the economy of scale. Because many of the goods are coming under FTAs from these countries, and the market share has been shifted to the imports. So these companies, which were surviving on 50% or whatever the percentage in domestic market and 50% international market, so that was able to run these companies. Now these companies are now finding it difficult to run because because of the rise of imports. The goods are there in the market, and it has become difficult to compete in the local market. And if they cannot compete in the local market, they do not have the capacity to give better price for the exports. So because of the lack of the economy of scale. So that kind of production is not possible because of the rise of imports. So this was also one of the problem which was faced. So another point again, which has been discussed about the current policy and which is part of the policy only, that India refused to join RCEP, and probably it made it difficult for India to become a major global player. So because it is a very very big grouping, but India said that when the people are finding it difficult to deal with the already agreed foreign trade agreements FTAs. So India thought that RCEP will further increase the imports in India. So many goods will start coming to India. For example, Australia is also part of RCEP. New Zealand is also part of RCEP. So even dairy products will start coming from these countries duty free, and obviously our dairy industry will be affected. So many concerns were there, because of which India refused to join RCP. But people, are debating that if we have refused to join RCP, how can we can become a global player in exports? But this is debatable. Now, another thing is that largely this policy was largely driven by the subsidies. So 108 MSME were recognized, but these subsidies were not available to many other crucial sectors, friends. So it is sad that many other sectors required these subsidies, whether they were MSME or not. So by defining MSME, many of the exporters who were not part of MSME, they lost because they did not get those subsidies which were given to MSME. But in any case, friends, India has to phase out these subsidies as per the rules and guidelines of WTO. So in any case, these subsidies will go. So last, I think, the low point of the current policy up till now is the lack of focus on the skill development and upgradation of technology. So this I have already explained in the earlier session, that in order to increase our product basket and the market basket, we have to focus on the skill development, R&D, research and development, and adopting the latest technology. Otherwise, we will be not able to export many items which we are still not exporting in any case. So, of the world demand, we are only catering to 30%. The rest of the 70% we are not catering because of the technology not available, or the technology which we have is obsolete. So the product which is coming out of those technologies are not acceptable in the international market. So these are some of the points which were there. So friends, because of these points which I just discussed to you, in, government of India is finding it very very challenging to come out with a robust new policy, and because of that, friends, the government of India is taking time to come out with a new funded policy. Also because of the pandemic, time lost in pandemic, and the balance of payment position, and WTO ruling against India to continue subsidies. So India is finding it very little difficult because of these factors to come out quickly with a new policy. But it will be coming out soon. So, but already it has become late by 2 years. So you can understand that. So, friends, with this, my was to you with the challenges and the opportunities which are there in formulating these policies. So, the idea, friends, of today's session, as well as the sessions earlier, focusing on the foreign trade policies of India, were that you know uh, 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 that the exporters should be aware of all this framework of the policies of the local governments, as well as the monitoring of the World Trade Organization. And accordingly, they should make their strategies, medium term and long term. Whether you are a small manufacturer or small exporter, medium exporter, or large exporter, it does not matter. Very important thing is that the knowledge has to be there. So it doesn't cost. Knowledge doesn't cost. It should be there with the exporters, and accordingly, the policies, the future direction should be created. So, friends, Azizji, good evening. Welcome to the session. So, friends, with this concluding session, I would only conclude that these are some of the areas which we took up in this particular limited series training, which that should also be looked into by any prospective exporters, whether you are new, whether you are established exporter. So having a knowledge of these issues, although you can get a lot of knowledge from Google, you can always Google about the current policy, what are the highlights, those things you can do. But logically and systematically, you also have to understand these policies, not only of India but for other countries also. So that is another point. I had taken only example of Indian foreign trade policy just as an example. But as an exporter, suppose you are exporting, your focus area is some country in Middle East, you should be aware of the foreign trade policy of their country also, and you should compare our foreign trade policy with their foreign trade policy. What are the differences? So when you do this exercise, you will find that you will get a lot of new insights. And friends, I had mentioned this also in the international marketing training also. When you do the country, when you create your country note, when you create your country profile also, these policy understanding is part of that only. So not only the home country foreign trade policy, you should also be aware of all the provisions and latest changes which are happening in the host country foreign trade policy also. So with this training, I am, friends, very confident that with these few sessions which we had taken in this series, you will be able to appreciate the structure and the approach of any government when they create such policies. So, with this, I conclude this training session as well as this series, which was almost not 6 parts. Sorry, it was 4 parts. So, in 4 sessions, we completed this training of foreign trade policies, And if you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we will meet tomorrow at 8:30. And uh, so I think there are no questions. So thank you very much for joining for today's session. And good night, goodbye. So we meet tomorrow at 8:30. Thank you very much.